Well, good afternoon, everyone. Javed Khan from Phoenix Systems. It is exactly 1 o'clock Eastern Standard on the 21st of March, 2018, and yet another exciting Let's Talk ERP conversation today with two friends of ours from SYSPRO Canada. Not one, but we're giving you two, double the pleasure today. I wanted to introduce you to Wayne Slater. Wayne Slater is, not only is he the author of Traceability for Dummies, but he also is the Vice President of Channel Sales for SYSPRO Canada. And the young, good-looking gentleman to the left of Wayne, to the right of you, is Mike Hudson with a T. He is now the National Sales Manager for Food and Beverage at SYSPRO Canada. So, gentlemen, welcome to Let's Talk ERP. Really intriguing conversation today, Wayne and Mike. And to tee it up, we were talking about traceability and food traceability in the last conversation we had with you. And this is sounds like this is a continuing conversation we're having with you today, Wayne.
Absolutely. So, yeah, in the last session, we kind of touched on a bit of what was traceability, and also we dove into, what would actually be a good system. Now we kind of jump into now you've got the system, what are we going to do next?
Love it. What are we going to do next? Okay, so let's jump in. I think, Wayne, we were jumping in with a poll question, if not mistaken.
Pretty much so, yeah. So we're just going to really cover the agenda first, but then we're going to jump right into a poll question, Javed. So this is today's agenda. At the end of the day, we're going to do a quick recap for those that weren't able to join us the last time of what we talked about in the last presentation, and then really dive into the heart of what we're here to talk about today, which is more, again, about the traceability system. Now that you've got it, how you're going to use it, and more importantly, how you're going to benefit from it. And from there, we'll actually open it up to a Q&A at the end, and then we'll have some good information exchange backwards and forwards. So, like Javed alluded, actually, yes, we're going to surprise you or not surprise you now with a polling question. So here we go. So this is one of a few polling questions we're asking through the conversation today, and also just a reminder, once again, feel free to ask any particular questions as you are participating in this conversation with Wayne and Mike. Please plug it into your area to ask questions, and we will certainly answer them near the end of our conversation. So interesting first poll you got here, Wayne and Mike. Are you using your current ERP system like SYSPRO? And you've got 4 different options, and we see the numbers are coming in. Just give it another second or so. Do you find, Wayne and Mike, that these are, like, ERP systems are now becoming somewhat constant, consistent amongst various organizations? This is now no longer a new thing. Is that what you guys are seeing?
Yeah, it's basically an evolutionary thing. We all know that the large customers, the big name brands, big retailers, because of the scope and size of their business, they required a larger base system, so they already have theirs. What's happening now out in the industry, very specifically, I'll talk about food and beverage because that's what I know, is we're seeing the evolution of the small companies now migrating into the small to medium business size to larger. And systems like QuickBooks, Simply Accounting, they're not being able to handle their capabilities. They also want to integrate in manufacturing processes so that now they have a fully integrated solution as opposed to the islands of information. So we're seeing the move towards what ERP is all about, a single repository of data that can be shared across all the departments.
So it looks like, sorry, Wayne, from our polling, we've got a tie here, 36% for financials with integrated manufacturing, and 36% have stated financials plus other standalone systems like MES, MRP, WMS, that are not integrated. Interesting. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on our polling results here.
Well, this is actually going to drive nicely into the content of this whole presentation, because absolutely, like, if you're just using your ERP system for financials only, that's awesome. It's a powerful financial tool. But like we kind of said, ERP systems they're capable of so much more. They are incredible machines at collecting data. And where we're going to take you in this presentation is really, you can, with all the data you're collecting, comes the power to make better business decisions when you actually analyze and use that data in ways that you can actually use to improve things like production and inventory management and things like that that we're going to dive into this presentation.
Okay, well, dive away.
Awesome. Thank you very much, guys. So just this is where we're going to cover off a bit of the recap of what we did last time. So, but before we actually get into some of the benefits, let's just make sure everyone's all caught up to where we were before. So, in its simplest description, like traceability is the capability to trace something. In some cases, it's interpreted as the ability to verify the history, location, or application of an item by means of documented and recorded identification. So that, obviously there's some great industries out there that really take advantage of traceability and really need it. Automotive, for sure. And traceability for the automotive industry is a process that documents the genealogy of the parts and the sub-assemblies associated with specific vehicles or a range of vehicles. So back, let's say 10 years ago, we did actually work with some automotive manufacturers in our prior world. And, they were like, is it really worth putting barcodes on all 10 or 20,000 parts that actually make up an automobile? And emphatically, yes, is the word. Automobile manufacturers are no longer, let's just say manufacturers, they're logistics giants. They bring in parts from all over the place. And even a recent example of the Tanaka airbag recall that happened, in that particular case, it wasn't the manufacturer or Honda's issue. It actually was quickly identified as being Tanaka's issue, and Tanaka had to deal with it. So, a great thing for the manufacturers to have traceability because they traced it back to a sub-supplier, and always good for them. Healthcare, obviously, there's been all sorts of things out there that have driven traceability in healthcare. Faulty implant scandals, evolutions in the legal framework. There's counterfeit products, and even patient safety are all issues that have highlighted the importance of traceability in healthcare. And then in food, where basically Mike and I's main domain expertise is really its ability to track any food through all the stages of its production, processing and distribution. And basically tracking that movement for food and basically traceability in the food industry and actually across all industries is tracing it one step backwards, one step forwards, and then also understanding what you did to manipulate their product in between. Oh, there we go.
Okay. So we'll delve a little bit on the Canadian food side of the business. I know we have participants on the call that are in other areas, but the metrics are kind of the same. In Canada, our markets are tending to grow. In 2014, food was just over $105 billion in size in terms of the value of production in shipments. And that represented about 2% of our gross domestic product. It's the largest manufacturer or manufacturing employer rather that provides employment to over 246,000 Canadians and supplies 75% of all of our processed foods and beverage products in Canada. More importantly, they are the largest consumer, the manufacturers are, of our actual agricultural products. So it's a looping economy within an economy, basically. Exports of food and beverage products stood at just over 27 billion in 2014, and that represented a 9.8% increase over 2013. Basically, it's just showing that, and these are 2014 numbers, that the industry is growing. Of that segment within food and beverage, meat processors or meat production was the largest, standing at about 25%. And then it filters down through bakeries, animal food production, fruit and vegetables, seafood, and so on. But they're all measured in the billions of dollars. So the marketplace is huge and it is growing. Okay. So, some of you might be sitting out there going, heck, I have nothing better to do. I'm going to try and implement a traceability software system. And you'll go through that process. The vast majority, they actually require a business reason to do it. And one of the biggest requirements typically is because you're trying to get into or already have big supply chain partners. Those big supply chain partners or retailers by default have a requirement that you are able to produce or recall and I guess demonstrate your traceability capabilities with the products you supply them. The timelines are shrinking in that requirement. Just a few years ago, it was about 8 hours. Now the typical is around 2 hours. For very small manufacturers, that's not a big deal, dealing with paper-based systems. But the larger your production, the more complex it becomes. Obviously, the logistics of compiling all that information is important. So it's the more you get electronic capture of data, not only from, or basically from the point that you receive the product through your internal manufacturing processes, through your finished goods production, then inventory and distribution, all of that ties together within an ERP system. Others of you may be looking at it from a regulatory compliance perspective. CFIA, as you probably know, have now introduced the Safe Food for Canadians Act. It's actually getting a revision that's supposed to be coming out April, May of this year.
That's right.
Still hasn't been solidified, but it's supposed to be coming out. But the basic concept of that is that it mandates the preventative controls of a traceability system, how you're supposed to do it, how a recall is to be conducted, what are the general timeframes, and so on and so forth. They also require you to pass a mock recall. So they pick a product, they will give you some certain parameters, whether it's based on time, a lot number, whatever, and they say go. And you have to be able to verify that you can produce where all the products came from, all the subset ingredients of suspect components, but more importantly, be able to quarantine or isolate the product that's associated with that lot. And then who did you send it to and where is it? Some of it might still be in your inventory. Some of it might be already out at customers. Some of it may have been destroyed. The important thing to note with that is you have to account for 100% of everything. Mm-hmm. If there is a fraction of a percent, you will fail that audit. And therefore, the tighter your data capture and the higher the resolution of it, then obviously the better it is to help you move that through.
Yeah. So Mike, can I ask you for this compliance? You mentioned this is an audit. Is this a mandatory yearly audit, or is it a random? They knock on your door one day and say, "Here, we're here to do an audit."
Currently, it's random. Typically, the larger the supplier or the producer, the more frequent the options are. So, for instance, in your typical abattoir business, actually not your typical, every abattoir, whenever a processing day occurs, there will be a CFIA representative on site. A lot of the large producers, they actually have on-site offices. Mm-hmm. The guys are there 100% of the time. For the smaller producers, it's, they have scheduled weekly, daily visits. They come in, they do their spot inspections. But for the recall purpose, it tends to be more random. They'll just come in and they'll it kind of depends on their daily or their regular monitoring. If they see things that are, starting to get out of whack, then they're going to push you, as they should. From a consumer perspective, I want to know that my food is safe. And the producers, by the same token, it costs a huge amount of money to go through a recall process. We'll get into it a little bit later, but the whole point is they need to know. It's not a should anymore. They need to know where their stuff came from, what it was used in, and where it went.
I find these guys really good for business too, because typically we get a lot of phone calls where it's a food company and they'll say, "Hey, the inspectors were just here. When can you guys come out and have a talk with us?" So that's really good.
Yeah.
So then let me ask you just a quick follow-up question to that then, Wayne and Mike. What tends to happen if you do not meet that audit requirement? Is there something laid out to say, okay, if you do not meet our audit requirements, this is going to happen next? Are you shut down? Is there a certain time period that they give you to say, okay, we're going to be back in another 2 weeks and we want all these areas rectified? Or is it like you said, Mike, this is a must? We're not, it's a zero tolerance. If you don't meet it, this is what's going to happen.
Yes to all of the above. Mm-hmm. So it depends on the nature of the situation and the organization environment typically. So if it's because there's different categories, and I won't get into that yet because there's a new listing that's coming out for the severity of the recall. So call it low risk, high risk. Oh my God, somebody could possibly die from this. So, but obviously for the minimal risk type thing, you're going to have time to show that you can make corrective action. For the oh my God situation, not so much leeway in that, up to and including shutdown. And it has been known to happen. CFIA does it on a regular basis. Well, regular, but they're empowered to do it. If the company is showing the inability to make corrective action and or be able to demonstrate that they have the tools to quarantine or isolate where everything is, they will be shut down. If they're showing that it's just a timing type of thing, they have all the information, but they're working the kinks out of the system. The CFIA is not there to be the bad guy. They're there to make sure that Canadians are safe. Same thing for the US FDA side. It's sort of the same thing. Everybody's working in a much more cooperative effort. And actually, I got to give CFIA a lot of credit. They are really, really stepping up their game to be more cooperative and more interactive with companies. With the education side of it, having direct people-to-people contact as opposed to, you send dear CFIA at gov.on.ca or something like that. You actually have people-to-people contact now. So they really want and work proactively with companies to help get those systems up in place, or processes, I should say.
Great. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate the additional inquiries there.
Yeah, no problem. Alrighty, and then of course there's the competitive edge. The single biggest thing on the competitive side is you want to the playing field is sort of normalized. Before it was again a few short years ago, if you had traceability, you were ahead of the crowd. Now you have to have it. You just plain do. So it's great to say that you do, but it's not really a big differentiator. The big one is the ability to protect yourself if and when an occurrence happens. So the faster that you're able to identify the issues and put resolution steps in place, you are now protecting your brand. Because as we've all seen in the news, those that hide information tend to get just burned over the coals with the media. Those that put up the plans very fast to identify what the product is, what the problem was, what they're doing about it, there's a heck of a lot more grace in how it's handled, and it tends to go away. So it's a method of protecting your brand.
Awesome. So we're actually into our second poll now. And
okay, great.
And actually the poll is, what are your specific drivers now for traceability, more or less? So is it just what we talked about? Is it compliance? Is it customer supply chain driven? Is it to kind of gain that competitive edge, or do you have another reason?
Now, what would be that whole other reason? Why do you think, other than the compliance and customer and supply requirements or having that competitive edge, what would be certainly other reasons people would want a traceability system or driver towards traceability systems?
I think a lot of it would have to do with, I'm running a business, and actually, traceability is actually kind of the integration of, like Mike was talking about earlier, multiple systems. So accounting, which could be the ERP system, the manufacturing side, the warehouse management. I'd want a 360-degree view of my business and what was happening in real time.
Yeah, the reality is to your point that you made earlier as to why are companies moving towards ERP systems is traceability now is more of is a side benefit for implementing an ERP. The biggest thing is the accumulation of the data. The more data that you have about how your business operates, the more efficient you can become, because now you have data that you can make rationalized business decisions about, as opposed to sitting back going, I think it's going to cost us this amount to produce this thing, or you do month-end analysis reports, and you go, why did that batch cost me an extra 20%? That's a blown out number, versus the batch I just ran. Without the data, you can't figure that out. But again, everything in our universe right now, not just us, but globally, is our timelines are crunching. You got to make faster, better, smarter decisions, and that's what these systems bring into play.
Yeah, absolutely. The results.
So it looks like from our poll, again, we have a tie here in the first two. 36% of the audience today are saying it's a tie between compliance or customer or supply chain requirements. Is that a surprise to you, gents?
No, those two are the single biggest. In fact, actually, I'm a little bit surprised. I would have actually expected the customer or supply chain requirements to be a little bit higher, because it's typical, and we'll get into this in a little bit again, that as I said, as smaller companies are growing, they do that by starting to engaging with the larger supply chain partners or retailers. And it's those retailers, it's your customer that's demanding it, because they need to protect their brand. If they're going to resell your product and there's a problem with your product, that tarnishes them. And they want to make sure that, similar to the Tanaka case, they don't want to be burned because of a sub-supplier.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. All right, in spirit of time, we're going to move on, because we definitely want to get to the really exciting meat, because we're still recalling, some of the stuff we did on the first bit. But really what we wanted to do, and we hit this home last time, is, these things are actually really expensive. Let's actually go back here for a second. So, Hallmark meat packaging, it cost them about $500 million. That was a very famous recall from 2008. XL Foods, this is a Canadian one everyone's heard of, that happened around 2012. That was a beef packing plant out in Alberta. To make a long story short, theirs ended up costing about $27 million, but ultimately put them out of business. And I always joke all the time, because we're always talking about people and people's food and things like that, and even your pets are immune from having a recall as well. And a very notable recall that happened years ago was with Menu Foods, and more or less, to make a long story short, they made some pets sick, and how people are with their pets today, and that was about a $24 million settlement as well. I think the thing rounded up to be about $42 million once the lawyers got involved. So very, very expensive.
And one point I'll put on there, I mean, these ones are the ones that hit the media that are huge dollar values. But this happens no matter what size a company. And in these cases, they were all contagion-based elements. And those are the ones that typically hit the media. But as we'll see in the next slide, a lot of it is just due to minor things, but it also hits smaller companies. And it's the smaller companies that actually have a potential more risk if they don't have these systems in place, because the dollar values and the amount that the company can absorb from the burden of what it really costs, not only in manpower, but also just in lost revenue and a diversion from what it is they do. They're on the planet to produce whatever food it is that they do. They're not on the planet to start running through the administrative nightmare of what happens when this hits. And they're not geared for it. And it's extremely costly. It's a huge diversion from what they do on a regular basis. And then it's more difficult to recover from that, because now, again, your brand has been impacted negatively. And as we all know, it only takes one black mark on your company, and it takes forever to get that off, or that sorry.
But it's almost like, given social media, it's just you're instantly tainted. It's almost like a curse on your brand. You would want to rebrand in some cases to get out of it. Exactly. Okay. And we dive into a little bit of that too a bit later too, is how you can use this tool to improve your brand too. So like Mike was saying, again, these recalls that we just talked about were really actually, were due to things like Listeria and E. coli and things like that. But the number one reason for recalls is actually mislabeling, maybe not listing an allergen or something along those lines. And that is actually the number one reason. That's another reason why you really want a really good ERP system. You want a really good labeling system that's probably tied to your MES system. you want that accuracy, and you want some good practices in place around ingredient and product substitutions and things like that as well, because it doesn't matter if your food's tainted or you've got bad labeling or incorrect labeling, it's all coming back and it's all costing you money at the end of the day.
I'm going to make one point on here, and this goes directly to the data capture and, more importantly, the whole traceability of one step backwards. I'm dealing with a company right now who unfortunately did go through a recall process last year for exactly this, but it wasn't for their product. It was for a supplier that mislabeled or omitted a dairy allergen, and it wasn't even it was one of those may contains, but it wasn't on the label. So this was a pure case of it might not, but it wasn't declared. So that product was then used in their manufacturing process, and because the supplier product wasn't labeled, their product wasn't labeled, they then sold their product. Everything had to be recalled. Now, unfortunately, they didn't have an ERP system. They had a standalone accounting system. They had a standalone manufacturing system. It took them 8 weeks and cost them over $200,000 in effort through the whole process. They are now engaged with us to rectify that problem, because it was a hard lesson for them to learn. They're a small company. Fortunately, they were able to survive it, which is a rare case for that level of a recall for a small organization.
That's a great point. That's a really good point. Some of the other reasons is now the stuff we were just talking about, whether it's Salmonella, Listeria, E. coli, all those evil words. But again, when we get into this, it was all about labeling. So what we're going to do now is we're still summarizing what we did in the last webinar, and we'll really speed it up because we're going to get to the last bit here, which we need to do is we're going to talk about some of the key tools, and Mike's going to talk a bit about these key tools that you're going to be required to have within your traceability program and within your plant to actually successfully do what you need to do.
Okay. So as we whip through this, so one of the key points is labeling, as we decided before. And typically what you need to do is, as product comes in, depending on your supplier, some of them may already have pre-barcoded labels, but the important thing is to accurately track what you're receiving and what as you consume it through your process. Normally you have to relabel the product as it comes in. So you generate a label, it has human readable information on it. This is a bag of salt. And this is my internal tracking number of it. So you need label printers. It'll label the product as it comes in. That stays with the product as it moves through your process. You may have labeling requirements within your process because you may do a spice mixing. And that's sort of like a subassembly within your process. And then the obvious one is to create a GS1128 label on your finished good product as it moves out. So that's labeling.
We happen to have a label printer behind us there,
such as
we actually do this.
Scanners. Now, I'll dispel a quick myth about scanners. Scanners are not magical devices. All scanners do is help you quickly and accurately enter in typically numerical information. So instead of having to type in a 10, 12, 14 digit numerical stock code, you simply scan the barcode and it enters that information into your system automatically. They don't do, magical things for you beyond that. The primary point is to be able to more accurately capture data rather than leaving it up to an operator of miskeying a number, which is the number one reason for mistakes within your processes. So that's data capture. Speeds up the process, eliminates errors. Then we get into scales. Scales are key to the value proposition so that you can confirm the weights of the incoming product. I'm absolutely flabbergasted how trusting we are as a people in general, that when we order, 1,000 kilos of something, that's exactly what we get. Specifically when you're in fresh products, because you get shrinkage, water evaporates, things like that. depending on how long it is. Scales help validate that, you know, you ordered 1,000, you got 1,000, or it's within an acceptable tolerance. But more importantly, to be used within your processes. So as you're measuring ingredients out in your process, and then ultimately when you're weighing your own finished good products on the way out. Because what they help you do is, say you were supposed to create a standard weight product. You know, I'm supposed to generate, you know, a package of bacon that's 365 grams, or 75 grams rather, that you want to be as close to that target weight as possible consistently and all the time. By having scales in place, and more importantly, having them integrated with your system so you are automatically capturing that data, you can now validate that in real time. And if there's a problem, make corrective action during the production run. Historically, all that information is analyzed after the fact, and you can't do anything about it. It's done, it's over with. So with the world of shrinking margins, it's important to get this information in a timely manner. Scales, and more importantly, integration in there is key to that capability. Next is, you know, you have all this equipment out on your plant floor and the rest of your business, you have to be able to get that data in. Historically, it's been wired networks, but wireless communications have come down drastically in cost, to the point where, and a lot of the food manufacturers that we deal with, it's a very harsh environment. So there's a lot of corrosion whenever you have to put in not only power, but more importantly, data connectors. You know, there's a huge, not only initial maintenance, or sorry, capital cost of putting the cabling in, but then there's a huge amount of maintenance involved in having to replace or patch those cables due to corrosion. Wireless eliminates all that. The technology has vastly improved. The cost of it has dropped dramatically. So wireless is typically all we ever recommend now.
And
going in.
These things are wireless, and your printers can be wireless.
Correct. Everything can be wireless, and it gives you the ability to be mobile. So if you have to, you know, move around in your plant, now you don't have to buy a gun, for example, for every single location in your plant. You can potentially share equipment between locations as production moves or as people move, which is obviously way more difficult in a wired environment.
Absolutely.
Okay, and then finally, you're capturing all this data. It's got to get stored someplace, and you know, that's what a server is. And servers, and we won't get into this in this seminar. Servers can either be on-premise, so you're keeping everything locally, or they can be out in the cloud. But the important thing is that, you know, you're storing all this information in a database. You got to store that data someplace, and that's the role of the software, the server. And then obviously the software, the ERP system itself, to collate all that data and present it in a meaningful manner to us humans.
Cool. And so when you're out there looking, speaking of, Mike was just talking about software, when you're looking at different types of software, in the traceability world, you're going to be confronted with 3 types of traceability type software. The first one is what I call the proprietary software vendor. These are typically smaller software vendors, and they provide some sort of rudimentary tools, you know, very industry specific, that will actually, receive product, may do some finished good labeling and things like that, and then tie into an accounting package. These typically don't have their own accounting system with them, so I always say it's the BYOAP, which is bring your own accounting package. But they are out there, they do work. They typically target smaller companies. So as you're out there researching a traceability solution, this may be an option for smaller guys. And then there's what you would call your hybrid guys, your manufacturing execution suite and your warehouse management guys. And these are the guys that actually are a bit more established. They have some very, very deep functionality in warehouse management and in manufacturing. And again, they typically are very specific. You know, some are better for further processors, some are good for the abattoir type business. And you'll find that even in other industries as well, they have different tools that are very specific to other industries. Again, they typically don't come with their own accounting packages. So they either integrate with a QuickBooks or they'll integrate with a SYSPRO, and away you go. So there's some interesting ways to use these guys. Most of these guys sometimes with ERP manufacturers may be good if you are an abattoir, because they have some very, very interesting features for that. And then, of course, since this is a conversation about ERP systems, we do know that the most feature-rich solution available is the ERP system. First off, the accounting's included, so it's not an integration anymore. And basically, now you can get some really, really rich reporting tools and actually dashboards and things like that, where you're going to be able to uncover and unravel the data that we're going to dig into now, and be able to show you some of the added value benefits of using an ERP system. But basically, at the end of the day, what we're really saying here is that if you really want to be, your company actually has an ERP system or is looking for an ERP system, that is one of the best solutions possible for doing traceability reporting, and then doing some of the additional reporting and analysis that we're going to get into now, that's going to show you why actually an ERP system and a traceability system can provide a bunch of additional benefits to you. So regardless of the solution that you end up buying, we covered 3 types of solutions there. They're all going to basically provide you, the same benefits at the end of the day. It's more around, the integration and the power of the reporting behind each one of them. But they're all going to require an investment of time, talent, and money. So you actually have to really seriously consider the option you're going to buy, the time it's going to take to implement it, and then the money associated with getting it involved, and then tie that back to the ROI. But basically, they're all going to allow you to identify and isolate, suspected products. They're basically going to help reduce lost sales and then help support your brand integrity as well. And like we talked about earlier, recalls are expensive, and I always like to say, like, traceability is really like putting an insurance policy on your company. It'll protect you when you need it. And so, just as a proving point, Mike and I, at the prior company we worked at, where we had a very small guy, experience a recall. He'd never had a recall in his history. And I always tell people, it's not if you're ever going to experience a recall, it's when. That is typically the nature of the business. And he actually had historically had nothing but a manual system in place. And some years ago, I think about 7 years ago, he replaced his manual system with some traceability software, and had that all integrated with accounting and things like that. And what he had for the first time ever in his business was he tested positive for Listeria, and he had a product and a production run that actually tested positive. One of the big things that was really done about this was actually the system itself was actually really, really able to isolate the problem really quick. The recall was actually done in 45 minutes. And for a small guy, that was really good. One of the big things that was there is you had a good process. So not only do you have the software, you actually have a good, what you would call a safe food and a recall process in place. So that normally includes who's running the reports, and then who's making the phone calls to all the supply chain that you may have sent the product to, maybe up and downstream. There's also a PR aspect of it as well. You have to inform CFIA. You actually have to, if the recall has got out to the public, you have to do a press release now. And so it is quite extensive. And the fact that these guys were able to wrap all that activity down in 45 minutes is fantastic, considering the majority of the time spent is typically recalling the data itself or tracking it down. And in the old days, it would be opening files upon files, telling the staff to stop doing what they're doing, and everyone get into this data searching, kind of routine until you got all the product isolated. The good part about all of this is that, again, nothing got consumed when it got out there. It was recalled very, very quickly. And not only were their supply chain partners raving about them, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and also the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture both praised this company for their abilities to actually have a really quick and efficient recall. So at this point, we actually have another poll. And
okay, so this is a poll 3, and the question here is, if you were not doing this already, which of these is important to you? I'm intrigued in the answers here. So you've got either real-time production performance dashboards, live yield or giveaway analysis, immediate production costing, or all the above. Let's see what we get in terms of, I wonder if we're going to get another tie.
And this is kind of a sneak peek into where we're going.
So it's looking like, gosh, half of the audience are indicating it's all of the above. So they're indicating that it's real-time production performance dashboards and live yield giveaway analysis and immediate production costing. Gentlemen, another surprise?
Nope.
No, no, and this is good because we're going there. So, so that's outstanding. So thank you very much for that. All right, so now we've talked a bit about what we kind of recapped in the last webinar, plus the reasons for where we're going now. So, but basically what we were trying to say is we kind of alluded to this earlier. ERP systems collect an immense amount of data, and then they ultimately have some very, very powerful reporting tools. So there's some really immediate improvements you can look at doing right out of the gate, leveraging the fact that you have these reporting tools and you're capturing all this data. So what we're going to do right now is look at some of these additional side benefits of a properly implemented ERP traceability system and what it can provide you.
Hey, so a good traceability system, aka an ERP system, collects an immense amount of data that you can use for continuous improvement, as we talked about before. With this knowledge comes the power of change and what can you actually do with that information. One area that the system will provide additional value through is in your inventory management system. Not only along with knowing exactly what items you have in inventory, you now have the ability to instantly track the precise location of where is it in your inventory. Is it in my dry goods area? Is it in my main inventory? Is it on the plant floor? Is it in a spice room for decanting? And is it in my packaging area? Is it in my finished goods warehouse? What products are currently on hold, and how much is the value of all that information? In food processing, typically there's two main systems that are used: is first in, first out, but also which is FIFO, and then there's FIFO, which is first expiry. Because obviously, and very specifically in fresh food, you want to make sure that your product is moved out quickly. And again, it all comes down to avoiding spoilage and avoiding the waste. Anything that you have to throw out, that comes right off the bottom line, and you need to account for that somewhere. So the tighter your system is, the more accurate your tracking. Obviously, the better controls you have on making sure, and not only that, but your customers want your freshest stuff, obviously, as well. You now track that. As we talked about a little bit earlier, barcoding, labeling, and scanners will help speed up that process and eliminate many of the errors that are associated with that whole process of where have I put the product, where is it going, who am I going to allocate it to. More importantly, and the bigger push now, which is also indicated on the poll, is the concept of real-time information. So you're capturing that data now. I can report on it now. So sales guys know, what do they have in stock? What am I going to produce? What do I need to produce based on sales forecasting? And more importantly, who am I going to get it to so you can properly allocate your product? Okay, so with the tracking of the data, as I kind of mentioned before, the intent of, you may implement a system for traceability, but you get the information that allows you to make decisions for basically improving your cost of the operation. So where am I losing money? And where can I make improvements? So for example, in a processing plant where manual methods are used, ingredients may be issued to the mixing blending room and not fully used up. Instead of being returned back to the raw materials area, they are commonly scrapped because the lot or the original source lot number has been lost, so they can't accurately track it. They have to dispose of it. This results in obviously waste. Another example is a company that maybe have two sausage production lines, and this is the more classic, where they're both making the same product on the same day during the same shift, but by looking at the data, you get interesting information of it. So you may notice that one production line consistently is completing orders faster. You're producing more. One line consistency, or one line experiences more consistent loss. Why is that? Or the other line might be able to more accurately fill up a 20-pound box of food, which improves your yield giveaway part. You can also then use that information for ongoing baseline trending. What are the ideal yields? How can you modify your recipes to get maximum yield out of your production process? And then you can use that to set daily, weekly, monthly goals. With an electronic system, you have the data at your hands and to make the appropriate actions. Sometimes it's as simple as additional operator training, and then you can measure the effectiveness of that training for other improvements.
I think one of the funny byproducts is when I was working with a company years ago that did a line analysis, and they had one line that was constantly behind the other line in production, and it turned out that line had the vast majority of smokers they were taking more smoking breaks, but they didn't know that until they looked at the data and then looked at the video footage and went, aha. So that's, again, using the data to find some interesting scenarios.
Now, I'm just watching the time, Mike and Wayne, but I just wanted to remind everyone a couple of things. First and foremost, please, if you've got questions, there's a ton of information that we're having in terms of conversation with Mike and Wayne today. If you've got questions or there's something that you need some point of clarification, please jump on and type in your question. We will get to your question. We've got a few of them in the queue. We'll get to them very, very, very soon. Just looking at my time, we've got some time still left for the conversation. But I also want Mike and Wayne, for you guys just to touch on very high level that this is not just necessarily for food traceability. This can apply to any industry, any vertical, any manufacturing type of organization. This is not just necessarily, hey, people are going to watch this and perhaps they're watching this as a playback or it's something in the future. They're watching and say, well, geez, we're not in food, so all this regulatory and compliance, all that stuff, gosh, that doesn't apply to us. Is that a true fact or not?
That's absolutely true. And at the very beginning where we said from the traceability, it applies across automotive, medical, pharmaceutical, it's everywhere. So even in that last example that I said about the sausage maker with 2 lines, you could be making the classic bicycles or any other product. Manufacturing is manufacturing, and some people go aha when I say this. Other people go you've simplified this way too much. But basically, all manufacturing is extremely common. You buy stuff, you transform stuff, you resell your transformed stuff. These systems, your processes in between and the individual components are obviously radically different. But the fundamental business requirements are exactly the same. You want to buy your ingredients at a reasonable price or subcomponents. You need to manufacture them efficiently, and you need to sell them profitably. And the data capture in all of those doesn't matter whether it's food, a car part, raw metals, anything. It's all the same. And typically, again, if it's not a government regulated thing, it's going to be your end consumer or your customer that's going to drive you for that.
Absolutely. And I think that ties nicely into the next point here we have, which is, we talk a bit about just, expanding your supply chain. And Mike touched on this earlier, but, really like the traceability system can help you expand your supply chain in 2 ways. The first one, it helps you achieve, like Mike was talking about earlier, the really tight recall windows imposed by some of these progressive retailers. So, here's a good example of Walmart themselves. They're well known for their logistical rules, but this is Costco, this is Loblaws, this is General Motors, this is anybody out there that's actually out there as far as assembling parts, and they're almost supply chain masters, like most manufacturing companies are today. So in addition to complying with their rules and criteria, the traceability system arms you with the reporting tools you need to meet their small recall windows. A lot of times, as you're courting them or they're courting you to possibly resell your products, they will actually impose a mock recall as part of the whole process. And unless you can show the performance of meeting their tight recall window, and I think some of these retailers are down to as little as 2 hours, and I know they're even tightening them up even further. I've heard Walmart's possibly going down to an hour. That's crazy. The second thing is it's an electronic world. It's the internet world. It's all about doing more with less. Traceability systems and ERP systems actually provide the opportunity to leverage something called EDI, which is electronic data exchange. On the screen right here is right from Walmart's website is what their expectation is of the EDI solution. And EDI basically is a standard for electronic communication between two or more computers, or in this particular case, two or more partners. It includes things like your orders, invoices, inventory, and more are all kind of electronically communicated to your supply chain partners. So many large companies won't do business with you unless you actually have EDI and actually meet their EDI standard. And again, that's at a high level what Walmart's EDI standard is. And Walmart believes that its business partners should all be using EDI, for some of the obvious benefits, that it decreases human interaction and the associated errors, eliminates the physical file storage. So you don't need to keep 7 years of files and things like that. Reduces management time, and then also reduces the transaction time as well. So it's all about efficiency, guys. And then one of the things that we really is an interesting byproduct. Now, a lot of people don't think about this, because when you're thinking about numbers and things like that, you're not thinking about the marketing side, and everyone always leaves that to marketing. But actually, marketing is one of the most important things of your brand, and especially the brands today, especially the millennials with social media and things like that. Brand loyalty is incredibly huge. And in a lot of industries, there's two levels of companies. There's companies that mass produce things and they sell them on price. And then there's the value add guys. And these are the guys, and if we get into a food example, these are the guys that offer maybe locally sourced foods, or they're non-GMO, or they don't have, any sort of, drugs that is in the animals, like the antibiotics and things like that. This is really big. You're even seeing big retailers like A&W leverage this marketing. But it's actually a way to do this. And so what you basically do, there's two aspects to this. There's obviously the packaging that you're leveraging, which is huge in today's brand loyalty. But then there's also leveraging barcoding, again, that Mike was talking about earlier. And one of the popular ways to do this is actually incorporate something along the lines of a QR barcode on your package. And that QR barcode, when scanned by a consumer mobile phone like your iPhone, can actually then tell the consumer the entire story or the journey of the company and the product, in a sense. This is also huge for traceability as well, because if you're a progressive retailer like Whole Foods and you're supporting a lot of the local small brands out there, and not only will say who that product was actually sourced from, maybe it was a farm, like a dairy farm in this particular case, it's a high quality cheese manufacturer, but also their processes, it's a family business, and then all the really good stuff about this product as well. And it's actually the ability of actually now connecting the emotional buying decision of the consumer to the product and to the brand and to the company ultimately. And a traceability system can facilitate that, and actually can facilitate that also from the finished good labeling standpoint as well. So this is huge, and this is an aspect that's actually quite often forgotten when a lot of these discussions happen, especially if someone is trying to differentiate their product, because they do a lot of value add to it. You want to make sure the consumer understands that value add and then creates a real loyal following for your product. And so what we're kind of winding down here, because I know we're at the top of the hour, but really what we were driving to is like traceability systems are actually not just traceability systems for recalls. Given all the data that they're collecting, and then the powerful ERP reporting tools, they're going to give you the proper insights you need, to actually go deeper and look at improving things like your sales, production, your costing, models for better pricing. Should I even take that large order from Walmart because it may or may not bankrupt me in a sense, right? Then of course, improving your inventory management. Everyone today is all about just-in-time, inventory. You want to make sure also what you've got, how much on hand. Sales wants to know when they can sell it, things like that. Obviously, associated with that is let's reduce and streamline the production costs, because obviously the more money I save, I can offer more competitively priced product, or puts more money in my pocket, which is really important to everybody. And then kind of like what we just talked about is the ability to differentiate your brand through marketing as well. That's there. And so all of these kind of boil together. They're all side benefits. And it's something that your ERP system can be doing for you that it's not already, if it's not already doing it for you, it can. And all this rolls up to improve revenue and hopefully improve profits. So on that point, we want to know, first off, we want to hear from you and get a feeling of how you thought today went. But also, after seeing the webinar today, are you likely to go back to your organizations and talk to others within your company and discuss what you've learned? Maybe start talking to more of the guys on the warehouse floor and in production about maybe extending the data collection systems, or actually extending the ERP deeper into the company. or maybe you're looking at revisiting your ERP implementation and your associated processes. This is something that always goes on, is when we get calls from customers at SYSPRO, it's obvious, they're wanting more from the system, but they're only using like 20% of it. And so we're like, wow, you really want a deeper ROI, we can do this and this and this for you. Oh my God, yeah, please come in and tell us how to do that. So it's quite often we get stuck, being your accounting package, but we can go in and actually gather manufacturing data. We can actually, be a part of your warehouse management and actually be really part of that whole reporting engine that brings your whole business together from a 360-degree view, and then provide these insights to actually helping you make better business decisions.
Okay, so we're a little tight for time, Wayne and Mike. I'm looking at we got about 4 minutes, and we've got 2 questions. The polling is closed. Clearly, 3/4 of the audience, 75%, are going to talk to the others within the organization and share what they've learned. And wow, Cordy, they're not going to do nothing. You're just going to go and have a nice pint of beer and just keep going on with your day. It's all perfect world for you. Congratulations. That's amazing. So 2 questions we want to briefly go through. So Rick has asked us, how often do you find this is a make or break opinion or option for the proposed ERP solution?
That's a great question. It all depends on what the motivations are. So from my experience, the customer is either looking for a new ERP system because their current system, their accounting package, or whatever they have currently is not meeting their needs. Or like we kind of gave an example earlier where someone had just had an auditor or an inspector in, or they just had a meeting with a supply chain partner and they've come back and said, hey, I've really got to improve what I've got, or I'm not going to be able to sell to that person, or I'm not going to meet my regulatory compliance for my next time the inspectors buy. That typically is, from my experience, what drives these conversations and really makes the ERP system the right ERP system choice really important for that customer. Like, how do you feel about that?
Basically the same. Hopefully that answers the question, because it's a little open-ended there. But from a make or break perspective, what we're hoping to get across on today's is it's not just about traceability anymore. It was a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Now it's more about how do you use the system to make your business better. Similar to Phoenix, we're here to help you understand how to leverage the systems to do that. There's no real expectation that you as our customers are how to intrinsically know how to use the system to do that. We're here to help do that. So and to blend our expertise in how can we do it. It doesn't have to be a major system change. It could be a simple report. You're already collecting the data, you just don't have visibility to it.
Yeah,
that's what it's about.
Okay, guys, that's awesome. Follow-up call. You guys got about 30 seconds to answer this one. What method of traceability are you finding that you're replacing? So Rick was mentioning spreadsheets, 3x5 cards, and any other database. You got about 15 seconds for that one, and then we'll just wrap up our conversation today.
The single biggest is that manual paper-based process. I still find it astounding how many, not only small, but large organizations that I go into where they are heavily manual based, not only spreadsheets, but physical pieces of paper floating around in the office.
And the level of sophistication is sometimes crazy to those manual processes.
They've come up with ingenious ways of doing it.
Yeah.
But incredible manual.
Yeah. Great. Gentlemen, thank you very much for this very insightful conversation today. Folks, the ones who are watching, you will get an opportunity to get a recording of this conversation, so feel free to share it on your social media channels. Great insight here from both Mike and Wayne. It's like the Mike and Wayne show, and the show's ending. Some great insight that you guys have provided. By the way, please look out in your inbox in the next 24 or so hours. You will get a follow-up note with a PDF version of the slide deck, plus the recording, so you can, again, review it, go back, see what you need to do. 25% of you don't have to do anything, which is, again, astounding. And also you have an opportunity to get Wayne's free book. Wayne and Mike, thank you again. And just for those folks, if you have not registered, we've got Rick Rush coming back from Secure ERP. He's coming back, and on the 18th of April, he's talking about data breaches. So please go to letstalkerp.ca, register if you have not done so, and we look forward to having having Rick come back. Folks, it is exactly 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's a wrap. Mike and Wayne, thank you very much.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for the opportunity.